1920s. For many people outside of the evangelical tradition, these schools often first come to our attention for their leading role in national politics. In recent years, for example, Wheaton College has taken its case about sex and health care to the U.S. Supreme Court. The president of Gordon College outside of Boston ignited a local firestorm with his reminder that the school does not sanction same-sex relationships. And in the Republican presidential primaries for the 2016 election, candidates flocked to schools such as Liberty University in Virginia to make speeches and praise Liberty's 7,000 acres of shared conviction. In the 20th century, too, conservative politicians hope to establish their conservative credentials by visiting these campuses. Candidate Ronald Reagan, for instance, made campaign stops at both Bob Jones University and Lynchburg Baptist College, the future Liberty University. As historian Daniel Williams points out, the 1970s saw the rise among conservative politicians of obligatory campaign stops at conservative, evangelical, and fundamentalist schools. For people inside the extended evangelical family, these schools have played an even more crucial role. As the late historian Virginia Brereton put it, to understand fundamentalists, it is absolutely necessary to examine their educational efforts. Fundamentalism and evangelicalism are not only religious beliefs, they have always been more complicated identities. We will not get a sense of that complexity unless we examine them in action. In other words, we have to ask not just what fundamentalists believed, but also what they did. Evangelical schools can tell us about more than just the religious beliefs of their conservative evangelical leaders and students. They can tell us about the day-to-day functioning of evangelicalism. It was often a complicated affair. In every decade, at every school, administrators balanced the fuzzy but ferocious religious imperatives of fundamentalism with the unclear and shifting institutional imperatives of higher education. It might have been impossible to pin down precisely what it meant to be a fundamentalist or to be a real college, but school leaders in every generation knew that to survive as schools they must always do two things at once. They had to protect their reputations as safe places for fundamentalist or evangelical youth, whatever that meant at the time. Yet they also had to offer the best possible modern educations, whatever that meant at the time. These schools, in other words, always had to balance their absolute need for academic legitimacy with their equally non-negotiable need to maintain their reputations for religious purity. By giving us an opportunity to observe those negotiations in all their complexity, the interactions between theology, politics, culture, education, and institutional life, studying these schools as schools gives us our best chance to make sense of conservative evangelicalism as it really is and as it really was. In addition, looking at these schools during the 20th century is uniquely important if we hope to make sense of America's continuing culture wars. Evolution and creationism garner the biggest headlines, but conservative evangelical colleges have always taught a profoundly dissenting attitude about more than just mainstream science. Was America meant to be a Christian nation? Which books count as great literature, and why? What is the proper role of a godly woman in regard to her husband? How should teachers in elementary and secondary schools teach their pupils about these things? The family of evangelical colleges and universities has not been at all monolithic in its answers to these questions, but taken as a whole, these schools have offered young people a distinctively evangelical environment in which to learn about them. They have also provided scholars with an insulated evangelical setting in which to study and discuss them. If we do not understand that environment, we will never understand the conservative side of sensitive cultural issues such as evolution, homosexuality, and abortion. After all, our culture wars are not between educated people on one side and uneducated people on the other, in spite of what so many pundits like to assert. Rather, our culture wars are usually fiercest between two groups of people who have been educated in very different ways. Also important is that we will get a stunted and slanted vision of the landscape of American higher education if we fail to include this unique network of schools. Just as other distinctive networks, such as historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, or all-women colleges, have shaped higher education as a whole, so have evangelical schools. In some ways, these schools stand out as institutional